Again, please. But yeah, chasing him around while people are turning on fireworks was a high stress
I bet.
situation.
Yeah.
But did you do anything with your family?
Yeah, I have a 2.5-year-old granddaughter and she is, you just have to keep an eye on, like.
Oh,
we
for
have,
sure.
6 of them.
Oh my goodness.
This is a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah, we had it at our house. So I was like, that's nice to have the privacy fence to fence him in with all the fireworks going on. Well, then everyone was doing it in the driveway and he has to be with everybody. So my plan didn't work, but it's okay. We typically have people stroll in like 5 to 10 minutes late.
Should we
So-
start a few minutes late or?
Yeah, we can.
Well, Erin is gonna be online.
Erin's on vacation.
But she should come online.
Yeah, and then Corey typically comes.
Corey should be here, Carrie might,
Yep.
and then Clayton. Oh, I do have notes.
Yay.
I've been written notes this whole
Yeah,
time.
this is perfect for you because she just, Sam just got her first
That's
one
what
on
she
the contract.
said.
Yeah, so this is perfect.
Do I need to update
Oh,
anything for
Erin's on
numbers
there,
or anything
sweet.
that you guys?
Nope, I will take that to the start and I'll sit down here for like the first 10-15 minutes. So when people stroll in online, I can just mark them. Like as a.
Where do you want this?
Yep, I'll take it and then I'll give it back to you and leave it on the chat box so you can see like,
Oh, chats.
yeah, if anyone is saying anything. Oh, Corey had to take her son to urgent care this morning, so she'll be online. So we might not have anybody else strolling in person. Typically.
Then we'll just have a really
Clayton or
close,
Carrie might.
have a really close class with Sam.
Yeah, there
Sam?
we go.
Yeah,
Sam or Samantha?
Sam.
Well, and Corey and Erin can unmute at any time and say anything, because
Okay.
they're usually pretty good about interacting and asking questions too, so.
I unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, works great. Thanks, Corey.
Yeah, I really am sad that I didn't get to be there and see everybody, but
Yeah, you would love Melinda.
I'll be there tomorrow.
Same, sounds good. It's up to you, Melinda. We can start now or we can wait a couple minutes.
Tell me your choice.
Okay, let's just do it.
Okay.
Because that's my
Alright.
for sure's. I'll introduce you really quick. That's
Oh,
what
okay.
Sheena does that. But this is Melinda Love. She is really the person who tells Adam Grady and Carrie Worsh what to do, I think, and everybody on that team. But how long have you been in real estate?
I've been with Keller Williams for going on 9 years.
Wow.
Well, I think 9 years in May, and
Mhm.
I've been with Adam for 7. So
And you were the
so
MCA,
for 2 of
Mhm.
those. Yeah.
right? So what Rachel was doing, now Landon. I remember when you were training Rachel too. That was so fun. Yeah, and then, how long have you been involved in like the contract to close process, would you
From-
say?
I mean, I used to process all the closings on the MCA side, but doing contract to close with Adam for 7 years
Mhm.
and we have closed over 2,500 homes, so it's been
Wow.
anywhere between almost 3,000 homes, so
Amazing.
in that many years.
Incredible, incredible. So yeah, very lucky to have Melinda today, especially because they're a nationally recognized team, that's for sure. So thank you for doing this, but
Lots of fun.
yeah, you take it away.
All right.
Thanks, Melinda.
Well, what I love about this class is just all the things that you have to do to get to the closing. And there's just, with real estate, it's a never ending a buffet of challenges. There's all kinds of questions. and challenges.
People. Hi, Carrie. I've missed you so much and Melinda's today, so I can miss her. Sorry, I was trying.
Glad you're here. You're fine. You're okay. We've got Corey and Erin online and.
Oh, Corey.
Yep.
Hi, Corey. Hi, Erin.
Hey, sister.
Sister.
This is my favorite salad.
Hi,
So,
everyone.
Kale and apple
Where's it from?
from Mama Jean's.
Nice, okay.
It's my favorite
Keep that in
salad
mind.
ever.
It's really good.
I made them make it. They didn't have it and I was like, you guys need to make me that special. Hey, what's up, dude?
Make sure you guys put your name signs up for Melinda too.
Oh, yeah.
That way she knows who you are.
Got that. Yeah, the fact I kept up with it this whole time.
I know.
You guys are almost done. You only have this lesson tomorrow left, right?
And
They
Corey,
got
do you want my
tomorrow.
little notes?
Yeah, that's
What is
exciting.
it?
Oh, note, our notes.
Melinda, you have to write your number on the board. It's like a rite of passage for our class.
Did I just stand on?
Good for you. Yep, let me get you two more.
I didn't bring my cards down.
That's okay.
Keep forgetting to do that.
That's all right. Perfect. Well, I kind of already said a little tidbit about Melinda, but she pretty much runs
Uh-huh.
the Grady team.
She's the
So
boss.
nationally recognized team. She's been involved in their contract to close process, and you said closed
For
over like
7
almost
years,
3,000
About 3,000 homes that we
Homes.
closed, yeah.
yeah, in 7 years. It's unbelievable. That's unbelievable.
It is,
Called Rockstar.
Mhm.
it's lots of fun. I love a good challenge, so I think when you love a good challenge, you love real estate.
That's for sure.
All right. Well, I know you guys have been talking about the receiving offers, making the offers, and now we're gonna get it under contract and get it closed. So have you got, I know Sam just said put her first one under contract, which is really exciting. Woo, it's
So
exciting.
proud of you.
Carrie, I know you're a longstanding agent, so you've probably been through all this.
And then click.
All right, how do I get this to click? This,
For some reason, it's given everyone some
Everyone
issues.
okay,
Right
I
at
think
the
I just have to
start.
click.
There we
Okay.
go.
So, we are almost done. You guys are about to graduate Ignite, which is really awesome. I think Ignite sets every agent up for success. So today we're really, again, gonna talk about best practices and avoid risk avoidance, referrals and reviews, the timelines that you deal with being under contract, and then what you do after closing. So, and then your daily success system. Does anyone want to read this quote? I can read it.
Real estate transactions aren't particularly trouble-free. It is a strenuous and trying time that requires all attention and effort you can command.
Which is very, very true. And I think, some agents go into real estate and they think, they look at their agent, if they bought a home or sold a home, and they think, that's easy, I can do that, anybody can do that. But it is not that easy, and you do hit lots of hiccups throughout the process. And so I think being solution-minded and just, to me, there is always a way to fix it. And just making sure you think through what those options are, and then present it to, James Shaw was on our team meeting, about a month ago, and he said, our number one job is to provide perspective to our clients, which really is provide great information for them to make a good decision off of. So, okay. Well, we will jump right in. So deadlines and contracts. This is so important. And if you are a high D and you like to, kind of skim over all the details, this is going to be your hardest piece, is making sure you don't miss a deadline. And I will share with you some of my tips as I went into transaction management and what I did to help me stay on track. And for Adam, when I first started, I was handling anywhere from 25 to 35 contracts at a time. And it was a lot of moving pieces. So we have what we call an 83 point checklist from under contract to close. And it's all the steps that we do. Now, we also minimize that into the main key items, but 83 is every single thing that you do throughout the process. So happy to share that with anyone. But you, as the person or the agent in charge of making sure we get to closing, that's not going to be everything you do. But what they're saying is you have a lot of people to talk to. So every time that there's a timeline in the contract, which is contract acceptance, the inspection period, and then closing, appraisal too, it can be in there depending on if it's a lender involved, which typically most homes are. You're going to have an appraisal deadline as well. But getting the contract processed to make sure it's smooth and easy is really, really important in getting that set up. So what we do is, again, there's like 10 things that I do when it goes under contract, and I just have that checklist. Now it's in my head permanently, but before I used to have a paper contract. Now we have everything online with our system. But those 10 things we knock out within the first day. And a lot of that is, it's getting the contract process to the title company, getting it to the lender, touching base with the other agent. If it's a buyer, we are going to tell them when inspections are. So we're setting up the inspection. If it's a seller, then we're going to find out when that inspection is going to happen. Then we're going to communicate all of that to the client and make sure that they know what to expect. So I know you've got your inspection coming up, making sure that they do know what to expect is really key, because an inspection can be overwhelming to some people. But knowing that you see those things every day when you are in real estate, you know, we see mold a lot here in the Missouri and the Ozarks. So, you know, it's not a unbelievable deal, but if you're coming from another state that never had that, a lot of humidity, they might be freaked out about that, right? Or some people have severe allergies, and so I will not buy a home with any mold, even though mold is very common in Missouri. So just making sure that you know those things that are common. And I don't know if you've ever done this. Have any of you ever followed and just hung out with an inspector for a day?
No.
And
but I'm
shadow.
going to,
Yeah.
I guess I'm gonna show up for like the last half, so it'd be interesting.
So one of the things I did when I first got started is I definitely shadowed an inspector. And then every time I got an inspection, I would make my habit to call that inspector, tell me the good, bad, and ugly. Tell me what I really should focus on, because an inspection report is so, it's so detailed, and you could easily miss something that was really important. And sometimes inspectors will put stuff further down, like in the non-urgent section, that really is something you need to pay attention to. So you know, that's where I would definitely, I made it a habit just to call, give me
And
the.
all of them are happy to do that with you, so
100%.
don't feel like you're bothering them. That's the one thing I just had to remind myself, is because we get in that mindset that, oh, we're bothering them, or they don't have the time to walk me through that. No, they are paid for that service, so I always call and say, okay, give me the rundown, or most of the time, the ones that I really like to deal with will call me and say, hey, just finished up, if I'm not there, usually I'm there. But hey, just finished up, wanted to tell you, these are the main things that you really need to focus on. And I mean, I've been at 8-hour inspections for commercial buildings. And so it's, even if I'm there, I still am like, okay, give me the rundown again, because as we're walking around or walking through, if they show me something, I don't want to miss it at the end. And I've never had anyone who was like, no, I don't have time to give you my overview.
And if you do have a client that's out of town that isn't used to homes in Missouri, right? Because a lot of people don't have basement homes. So there's just some unique things that Missouri has that other areas of the country do not. And I would even, like, if there's something that's not a big concern, but the client is really like, this is a big deal to me, get them in touch with the inspector, because again, that inspector can help give you leverage on what's most important to focus on. And again, our job at the end of the day is to get any and all information, do any and all due diligence. So the other thing about inspection reports that I would definitely do right away, as soon as you get it, you've talked to the inspector, you figure out what are the big concerns. If you need a specialist, like some inspectors, they know a little bit about a lot of things where they're not the specialist. And so we've had an inspector take a picture of the roof, not mention that the roof needs replacement or has any major things. And so then we sent a roofer over and they were like, oh yeah, this roof needs replaced. So just make sure you build out a list of vendors that are your specialists. So a roofer, a plumber, an electrician, a structural person, anything that's the big mechanical components of the home, I would definitely have an expert that if you see a problem on an inspection report, you can get them to get out there and get you a quote quickly so that you can get it back in time to do your inspection notice. Again, our contract reads buyer does all due diligence. Septic and well, never skipped a septic and well inspection. One of the people on our team, before he was an agent, he was a teacher for 7 years, 10 years maybe. And he bought his first house, and it was an old farmhouse in Rogersville. And, you know, we weren't his agent at his first purchase. We became his agent when he went to sell that home. And then he ended up, we hired him to work with our team a year later. But he bought this whole farm home. The agent told him not to do an inspection on the septic. And so he didn't, and told him he didn't need it. Needless to say, that septic, when we listed it, had to be replaced. It was undersized, it was not working properly, and it was definitely, it was bad. So anyways, it was about a $10,000 repair that, you know, they had to pay attention to, that they, so always, if you're representing your buyer, if it has a septic well, get those inspections. Outbuildings, if you have an outbuilding and it has electrical or plumbing, don't skip that. Like, I would recommend it. It usually costs $120, $150 extra. But again, what I tell buyers, guys, this is your most expensive asset. If we're trying to save a couple $100, like, it's so worth to do those inspections just to know and have peace of mind. So, but septics, I became a really great septic expert over the first year or two of my career in real estate, because I helped, I think, 12 of our clients replace septics that year. So those are just some key pieces that I would definitely share with you on inspection reports. But going back to the timelines, you know, there's just a lot of little things that you got to get done. And that one big thing is communication, like communicating all the, what's going on. People just want information. So who is involved in the transaction? Being a great co-op agent is really important too. So a transaction touches many hands. It's not just handled by you and your client and the co-op agent. It's the title company, the processor, the lender, their processor. Lenders, a lot of times, you know, if it's on a shared driveway, a shared well, if it's a government loan, there's going to be certain hoops you have to jump through. So just knowing all the ins and outs of what you need to do for inspections and any documents you need to get for the lender, to try to know that up front. We had one recently where we had a listing where the neighbor's fence encroached on our client's plan for about, I think it was 8 inches. And I mean, we met ahead of time, 30 to 45 days before closing, and made sure the title company knew, like, hey, we have 2 options. We can either get them to move their fence on their land, or we could do a new survey and get that, the parcels, the 2 pieces of land resurveyed and get that done. So they chose to do the survey, and then all of these things had to happen to get that done, to get it closed. And I'll give you a few of those. 1, we had to get the survey done. 2, we had to get both parties, that client that isn't ours, they're the owner of the other land that isn't ours, to sign off on this survey and sign off on the deed to convey that 8 inches to them. It was us, our person had the 8 inches. And then that lender of their land had to sign off on it to release that 8 inches. So there were a lot of moving pieces. And if we weren't proactive to get those done, it would have been the day or 2 before closing. Somebody would have said, well, that lender has to sign off. And then we would probably had to delay closing 2 to 3 weeks, because trying to get a hold of all of those parties is not fun, because it's not our client, their lender, you know, they sell the loan. Like, it's with some other company. So anyways, we had to go through a lot of hoops, but just when you're looking at who's in the transaction, make sure you know who your key players are, and your processors for the title company and the lender. Definitely make sure you're staying in touch with them. When do I expect title work back? What on the loans? Hoops do I need to go through for you?
How did you guys find out that there was a 8-inch?
They knew, the sellers knew.
So they had disclosed it.
Yeah,
That was nice.
yeah. But it was still quite a bit of detail, and our transaction manager, Jenna, like.
How long was the fence? Like how many?
Yeah, it went through all the land, like it was, I think it was like 11 acres, so.
Oh
It was
my
8
God.
inches, and it was a tiny sliver, like, right, and there's no real monetary value for that, but we had to get all the pieces so that it could convey correctly. Like she had literally had to get the survey, it had to get signed off by the county and the
Mhm.
city, get recorded, all of that, and then get the release from the other mortgage company before we could close.
And was that at the seller's cost or the buyer's cost?
Seller's cost, yeah. Because it was their land that encroached on the neighbor's land, so, and people, when they put fences up, I don't know, they're not surveyors, right? So it's really important for them. Sometimes I've even had the surveyor that did the survey meet a person that's gonna put up a fence just to have just no question,
Mhm.
like this is the line. I recently had 2 clients of my sphere that have had land or line disputes with their neighbor. One neighbor, his mom owns the property, but now he's there helping her and he's getting really aggressive and actually tried to run over my friend with his running lawnmower. And anyways, we called the surveyor, they came out, they marked the whole line. She's putting up a privacy fence. She actually had 6 inches or 3 feet more on his land than she thought and he thought. So that was interesting. Okay, so timeline, what are the first things my buyer needs? What do buyers need to know and do? That's really key, especially 42% of all homes sold every year are first-time home buyers. So first-time home buyers need a lot of information. They need a lot of hand-holding. They just don't know what they don't know. So that's our job to help protect and guide and advise them. What do I need to know and do? And if you're a new agent, like there's a lot to know and do and just a lot of pieces to a puzzle. What does the rest of the team, the co-op agent, inspectors, lenders need to know, take action on and when? And then what am I doing at each point to bulletproof the transaction and set my buyers up for success? That bulletproofing the transaction, again, with us, the number of transactions that we have closed, we have seen a lot of things, but we still currently see new things happen all the time. And it's really strange, after 3,000 closings, you would think you'd seen it all, right? It's not, there's still new things that come up. And I would just tell you, like, just being proactive and taking action. The lender's gonna need things from you. The other agent's gonna need things from you. When an inspector is gonna go out and inspect, they usually need that CBS code. So timeliness and responsiveness are key to, and being proactive are key to being able to get through to the closing. And then when there are problems that come up, you're not alone. You guys have other agents to talk to. You have our broker to talk to. Like, I promise you, there is always a solution. It's just sometimes you have to think outside the box. And it always comes back to negotiation. At the end of the day, it's all going to come back to a negotiation. A lot of buyers, well, if they don't fix everything, then I'm walking. And the seller gets the inspection report. I'm not fixing anything is the first thing they say. And if you're a new agent, you're going to take that to heart. You're going to think, okay, I'm done. Like, I have to just send my mutual release. You need to give them time, let them process it, give them the report, let them think through it, especially a seller. Sellers almost always, the first response is, I'm not fixing anything. I mean, almost every single time. And if you just send them the report, let them to process.
We'll talk on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, you come back a day or two and they're like, okay, I didn't realize how bad things were, because they can't see what they can't see either. So a lot of times you just need to give people time to process and come back at them and just say, hey, I get you don't want to fix everything. What are you willing to fix? And just get started there, because it's, again, you're negotiating with your client, you're negotiating with the other agent, you're negotiating all the time with everyone. So.
Well, you have to remember, for them, it's personal. That was
It
their
is.
home. There's nothing wrong with my home. I've lived there for blah, blah, blah. And for them, it's super personal. So you have to just always remember that.
You're right.
I've
And
heard
they're
different
baby.
strategies on when to discuss the inspection report. Like
They
team-
get it the same time you get it. So I always message like my client and say, hey, I know you just received the inspection report. Please review it. Let's talk. And then I give them at least 24 hours before we're going to talk. Because the first thing they're going to do when they read it, there's nothing wrong with my house. I'm not fixing anything. Then they start to think about it and they're like, oh gosh, we really had that electrical issue. Our house could have burned down. Or we have termites. I mean, they start to think about it. And so I don't talk to them for at least 24 hours or overnight, I'll just say.
What about on a buyer?
With a buyer, I would also give them time. Make sure you're proactive and say, hey, you're gonna look at this.
Yes.
We're gonna call the inspector if you have any major questions. And then let's set up a time to sit down and go through it, whether we do it in
Yes.
person or over the phone. And then you definitely should point out the things you see. But just know, like, first, actually, I give them an opportunity to tell me what's important to them, because sometimes things are not that, some things are not big things to them, especially if the husband can do work and repair things. But then other things, like if there's a major issue with electrical, like, again, I'm gonna have an expert out there. One of our girls is doing an inspection and the panel shows that the wires, some of them are overheating. And so we're like, oh, we got to get an electrician out there to check that out, because there's definitely something going on.
Well, and also I think communicating with the seller's agent, because like Adam Grady and I did a transaction together and I was afraid that my client was going to walk. And I called Adam and I'm like, hey, if nothing else, there's live termites right now. I said, so if nothing but get somebody out there. So it's also a courtesy too, because I called him, I'm like, I know you would want to know this. And just in case, before I ever even had talked to my client, because I was on site for the inspection. And I'm like, okay, they're gonna want this taken care of regardless of whether if my client sees it and it's like, that's a no deal for me. Or whether my client is like, okay, they need to fix it. Either way, it gives the seller's agent time to get it started then. Because that's something they're gonna wanna fix now. They're not gonna wanna wait 2 weeks or 10 days or whatever. So I think it takes a lot more communication than what people anticipate. Because if you're truly actively engaged in the transaction, you're not just communicating with your client, you're communicating with this huge group of people in a basket. And we ended up getting to close, but I mean, I was super concerned. And so, but it was also a courtesy. I didn't have to immediately pick up the phone and say, hey, here's what we have going on. I did that because of respect and because I would hope somebody would do that for me.
Yeah. Well, and I would
And
tell
then
you,
by the time you get to the client, you've already kind of
I
squashed
can
the
say
bug.
they already have somebody en route to fix this or to look at this or whatever. And it just is, especially a first-time home buyer, which was what my client was. And I was like, okay, this may be there was two things. And I'm like, this may be a no-go, but I'm gonna give him the opportunity, but I'm gonna give them the opportunity to already be en route to fix.
yeah.
And I will tell you that that goes a long way versus getting the report and you're like, why didn't you just say something?
Yeah.
Oh, we had running
True
water,
release.
we had a
Yeah.
toilet leaking and you didn't say anything and now the floor's ruined. And I mean, there's so many things that if you just give people a heads up, even if I'm showing a property and I see something that's what I would consider a concern because it could cause property damage, I always call and say, hey, heads up. I tried to get that toilet to stop running, but it's still running. Or I turned the water off because it was leaking or, just whatever that you can provide back goes a long way.
I agree 100%. That is very, very vital if you're seeing something. And with termites, it's interesting. In some areas of the country, termites are a big deal. Like in Oklahoma, termites are a huge deal, like crazy. Like they spend like $2,000 to take care of termites in Oklahoma.
They
City
tarp the
versus
house there.
about
like-
300 here.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. And termites can do damage if they've been there a long time. They can eat away at like structural girders and stuff. But again, if they haven't done a lot of damage, they're pretty easy to fix and take care of. So we had one where it was a septic issue and the agent called us and said, hey, this is what the septic inspector is saying to us. And I'm just going to tell you, inspectors, again, they know a lot of things about a little bit about a lot of things. They are not experts. And so this septic inspector must also be a house inspector, and he flagged something on the septic. We sent a septic expert out and said, nope, this is this, and this. And so we were able to squash that, get a report from a septic expert that took care of what the inspector showed. And again, it's that proactive approach to where making sure that they know. Okay, so here's our total buyer timeline. We're getting this inspection set up because again, you have so many days in your contract to get inspections done and get that over to the other agent. Got to get earnest money to the title company, inform the listing agent of the inspection schedule. Then we have the actual inspections. If your client is attending the inspection, you do need to be there. A lot of times for ours, if the client does want to attend, we usually have them come the last hour so that they're not in the inspector's way. Because if they're in the inspector's way, the inspector's going to miss stuff. They're not going to be as focused as they should be. Then we're going to send the inspection notice. The other agent's going to send us a response. And again, we're going to negotiate typically. Then the appraisals due. Then we do a final walkthrough. I would always recommend, please don't ever skip that final walkthrough. And the other thing that I would highly recommend is if there were a lot of items on the inspection notice that you asked for, do the re-inspect. Like I recommend highly to all of our clients, it's like $100. I'm not an inspector, right? I can go through and do that final walkthrough and we can look at things, but I'm not a plumber. I'm not a structural expert. I'm not an electrician. So there's things that are outside of anything that I could truly just look at manually and take, like the oven is working or not working, right? I can tell that. Garage door opens or closes, right? But definitely get a re-inspection. It's so worth that $100. Like, and
It's
again,
a peace of mind.
and then the inspector, if something is wrong, I've saved our clients so much money because that re-inspection, if the inspector misses something, then they're liable for that. That's not on us. So it just takes the liability off of you versus the professional that did the inspection to begin with. Definitely when you're doing a final walkthrough, and I'm happy if any of you guys want our final walkthrough form, I'm happy to share it, but you need to check everything that you can. It's not just walking through the house. Oh, everything looks great. No, it's flush toilets, open the garage doors, turn on the stove and the oven, turn on the water in the bathtubs, make sure they're draining. Make sure you have hot water because again, if you don't do those things and you don't check them, people can end up, well, my toilets are now backing up into my house. And then you didn't do the best job for your client to make sure those things were functioning as intended when you close the house, before they close the house. Also, the final walkthrough, like Adams went through one where, it was middle of winter and the pipes had burst, well, we're not going to close until we get this fixed, right? Yeah. So there's things that the final walkthrough just protects you, it protects your client. It's just the best. But make sure you're checking everything. Like I turn every shower on. I turn everything on.
I'm always amazed when somebody tells me they're doing a final walkthrough 30 minutes before close. I'm like, how? Because you got to drive across Springfield and that's 20 minutes.
Right.
So you're literally going to do a 10-minute final walkthrough. And it always causes me such great concern.
Yeah.
Like I usually always, like if we're closing at noon, we're always going to go and do the final walkthrough early that morning. Because if there is something wrong, we're not going to make it to close.
Yeah.
I just am always amazed. Have you seen that where they're like, oh yeah, 30 minutes before close, we're
Definitely
gonna.
seen agents do that.
When we actually train our agents, like a lot of agents don't realize they need to check those things. It's our last chance to make sure everything, and our contract says it. It's
Well,
our
and a
last
lot of
chance
times
to
our
make
clients
sure-
are moving in right after close. So do you
Right.
want them to move in and the toilet won't flush?
Right.
I wouldn't want to.
Or it's not, the tub isn't draining, or
Right.
we had one where so I'll give you two examples. We had one where the hot and cold water were opposite.
Reversed.
Yeah, and we got that fixed. But then we had another one where the inspector had done the inspection and this was like an upstairs bathroom and nobody used it. Well, and he tested everything and everything was working, but then they go to use it. They put, the inspector's not standing in the shower when he turns it on and make sure everything's functioning. They stand in the shower and it starts leaking, like whatever the pressure was. Yeah, so anyways, that was the inspector, it was just a miss. And so our inspector has helped. He's not our inspector, but the inspector that we use quite a bit has, he backs up his word to his clients too. So, which is really great. So
Who do you guys use?
we use Cornerstone,
Okay.
Aaron Driscoll, Kasha's husband. He does quite a few of our inspections. And he's really good. Like, again, he he will call the client and talk to them at any time, you know, we'll go over stuff, and then he, you know, if he misses something legitimately, I mean, he has, you know, insurance too, where a friend of mine, he did the crawl space and somehow missed some rotted girders on the front of the house, and anyways, he took care of that and fixed it for them, so it was just, nobody's perfect, that's the thing, and I always tell our
Humans and a
clients,
human process.
yeah, I tell my clients that there's no one that's perfect, there's no inspector that's perfect, they're gonna miss things. So if there's any concerns you have, we should make sure that they know of those when they're going to do the inspection. So like if windows are a big concern to you, make sure that you have them checking every window, right? Because if it's an older house, sometimes windows can go bad and rot out, and I've had a friend where her window was completely rotted out and it wasn't caught on the inspection, but it just was one of those things.
Well, I also
so.
think people think inspections are like,
The check in the box.
yeah, they're like bulletproof and, well, the inspector inspected it. Well, okay, have you ever taken your car to the or like to the auto body shop or the mechanic and you're like, hey, it's making a noise. Mechanic thinks they fix it, you drive down the road, guess what? It's still making the noise.
Yeah.
Everything's kind of like that. It's not, they're not gonna catch everything. They don't, how can 3 or 4 hours or 2 hours in a home catch everything?
And then you can't see everything.
And you
There's
can't
just,
see
you can't see through walls, you know, they have water meters and moisture meters and all that stuff now and infrared, but you still can't see behind a wall. Like, it's just impossible.
And a lot
So,
of times the seller is not gonna let you do an invasive inspection where you're opening drywall. I mean, that's what you would have to do to find some of that. And there has been times when I've requested that, like we need to open the wall on the whatever side, but you're also gonna be responsible for repairing that back.
Yeah.
Should you choose not to continue the purchase, but I think that you have to be willing to ask for that if you feel like there is an issue.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times as new agents, people they don't know what they can ask for and not ask for.
well, and that's where you just have to ask a lot of questions and ask people that have been in real estate for a while. You know, asbestos comes up once in a blue moon, but when it does, like we have to call an asbestos professional to go
Lead-based
verify.
paint.
Lead-based paint very rarely comes up, but it happens from time to time. So it's just getting that knowledge under your belt, and you aren't gonna know everything, and your client's gonna ask you stuff and you may not know. I would never just BS them. I would just say, you know what, I don't know, but I'm gonna go find out. Or give me just a few minutes. I want to double check on a couple of things and then I'll call you back. Like, because you're not gonna know everything. There's just no way to know everything. We have one right now where we've opened up the wall.
You did an invasive
Yeah.
inspection because you had a suspicion that led you to want to do that.
Yeah. So we're.
And it happens.
And
And
we're fixing it all, which
of
is great.
course. But had you not opened the wall, you wouldn't know what you were really dealing with.
And people that have really bad allergies, there's mold and mildew test, which takes some days. So again, some of the stuff you have to do it quickly to get the results back in time to do your inspection notice. All right, so here's some definitely interactive and communication points, which I know we've talked about a lot of them. So we have, when am I reminding the buyers to not make a big purchases? Oh, sorry, we'll go to this other one. So communication on deadlines is always important. Communication of contract to other parties such as the title and lending, we talked about that. Lender and buyer communication, that's really key. So if you're the buyer's agent and you don't know this lender, you never worked with them, making sure you do an introduction to that lender and introduce yourself, but your buyer, so we've had ones where, you know, and I won't name lender names, but the lender is not doing their job. They are not keeping that ball moving forward and they aren't getting stuff to people in timely manner. And you can't get a hold of them, like they don't answer their phone. And so we will get our buyer to put leverage on them because your buyer has the most leverage with their lender. It's their client too. The lender doesn't have to talk to you. But that's where if you know a great lender that has great customer service, will respond even at night to your client, like that's who I'm always going to recommend to my sphere and family, is someone that cares like I do to take care of the client. Communication of a list or list of recommended title companies. inspectors and insurance agents. And I know we have that with our documents for a buyer and seller, but you will want to create your own list of vendors that you love and highly recommend. Scheduling and communication with inspectors and listing agent, and then sending amendments or inspection reports to other side, title and lending. So that definitely is something, if you make any changes to the contract, the title company needs to know. The lender, if there's a change in sales price, would need to know. The lender does not want to see the inspection notice and reports. You could cause your deal to be totally shut down if you send an inspection report and notice to the lender, depending on what it is, because they have so many red hoops to jump through. So just be aware of that. Additional questions to ask yourself is, when am I reminding the buyers to not make big purchases? So when you meet with them first and you're doing a strategy session and you're talking about their needs and wants, you do need to make sure part of your speech is, hey, when we go under contract, and then when you go under contract, remind them again, you cannot make any major purchases. Like, you can't go out and buy a car or ATV or a RV. Like, you just cannot go out and buy new furniture. You need to wait until we are closed to make sure that, because, and the lender should remind them this too, but I would definitely make sure it's part of your speech with them. When am I communicating when to set up utilities? So we send that out a week ahead in an email, along with all of their closing information. We get them all the utility information. And then I would definitely, make sure they've done it before we go to final walkthrough. And again, if they're brand new home buyers, you're gonna have to kind of ask them 2 or 3 times. I can't tell you, probably in a handful, out of all the transactions I've been a part of, we've had about a handful that did not get utilities set up on the day of closing. And even though you remind them, I had one, I know I reminded him 10 times and he still didn't have them set up. I'm like, okay, you're just gonna be one of those people. And am I communicating notice of any holidays that may delay process? So that's definitely key. You can't close on a holiday. Title companies and banks are closed. So when you're writing a contract, just make sure your closing date isn't on a holiday. How do I negotiate the inspection report? And when am I communicating this information? I know we talked about that. Do you guys have any questions about that?
The earnest money, it's 5 days, no matter what, no matter if there's holidays or not, right?
Correct.
Depends on the contract, because commercial says 10 business days
We write
or
10 in.
7 business
So
days.
we take that 5 and write 10 in, because the new contract, you can put a number of days.
Yeah.
So we always put 10, just because if we're working with an out-of-state buyer, like, it's just not, now a lot of title companies, you can actually pay on their websites.
Yeah,
which-
and some of them say 10 or have blank banking days, which, what's the interpretation of a blank banking day? Is Saturday a banking day? Some banks are open on Saturday.
Yeah.
So that's one of my pet peeves about MREC, is that every contract does not read the same in certain areas. And so that line right there is one of my pet peeves. Because I've worked across almost every sales contract there is, and I'm like, so stupid that these aren't all the same.
Yeah, I can see where 10 would make it a little more
We
easier.
just put 10 in there as a standard template. And like, we use .loop, so we've got all of our templates built out to where all the standard things that we like are already in there.
And you don't have to take on the contracts anywhere, you do not have to take the number that's there. If you leave it blank, that's the default, but you do not have to accept any of those. So if you want, a 45-day appraisal period, or you want whatever, that's between your client and your recommendation. So I mean, like you guys said, I don't do 5 days for earnest money, because if it's over a weekend, or say like this last weekend, which was a holiday, you would have been snake eyes right in the middle of a holiday, which would not have benefited your client at all.
Now, I will tell you, I've very rarely seen it to where the other agent is like, you don't have the earnest money, we're canceling the contract.
Right.
But over the COVID years of where there were multiple offers and stuff and better offers coming in, that happened a couple of times. People were like, sorry about you. You don't
Yeah.
follow the contract, you're out of luck. And so and then your buyer's like, what? Why
What?
wouldn't you tell me? Like, I mean, oh, could you imagine?
Well, and I set up automatic reminders when I have a client that goes under contract. It automatically emails them out at the 3 days out, at the 1 day out. So they're gonna know your earnest money's due in 3 days, your earnest money's due today. Or, hey, if you've already done this, please just shoot me back an email and tell me. Because you've got to have systems. You would think that people are adults and they'll take care of it, but I have called and emailed and called and emailed and been like, okay, you don't do it today. Friend, here's the online link, pay it wherever you're at, pay it, get it done. But some people need you to stay on top of them that way.
I find investors are. you
The
have to-
worst.
Yeah.
They're the
You
worst.
have to, it's like your kids, you just have to remind them 15 times, and then you have to, what can I do to do this for you? Like, do you need me to just go in?
Do you need me to come by
bank
your
account?
office and pick up a check?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a true story right there.
You and I've been there, haven't we? On documentation points, you know, it's just talking about when do you document things and when do you send those to all the parties. Again, like Carrie said, you do need a system, and we have a contract to close checklist. And I'm sure you are gonna build one if you don't already have one. I'm happy to share ours, but it just tells you all those timelines that you really need to take care of. But anytime you change a sales price, right? If we're negotiating inspections and Sam, I say, hey, my seller is only gonna fix this much, or they're gonna give you a credit of 3,000, and your buyer's like expecting it's like, let's say it's 7,000 to get everything done. And you're like, I'll cut my commission by 1,000. Like, we don't want to cut commission, last resort, but we've all had to do it to get things to close from time to time. And so that would have to have an addendum to change the commissions. So just know there's certain things that are gonna take, if you change the closing date, you know, the contract reads on or before. So if you close before that closing date on the contract, you don't have to do an amendment. But if you change it to afterwards, you definitely need to get that amendment signed by all parties prior to your closing date. So, because otherwise you're out of contract. And if that other side wants out of contract, then you have no legs to stand on. It's done. And then making sure that, you know, your client, every client is different. So some like to be text, some like to be called, some like to be emailed, like sometimes you do all three. I definitely think when in doubt, pick up the phone and call. Calling your client and staying in front of them and showing them and telling them what you're doing for them is always really important. So what is the plan for follow-up after a document has been sent? Again, and when we send it to the other agent, not every agent is as responsive and or is going to do everything you need them to do when you want it done. So you're going to have to sometimes follow up on a document that you send to someone, especially an amendment and or an inspection notice, those kinds of things. If you don't have it back, I mean, I've seen all agents, there's some that are really great and they knock it out. And then I've seen some where they don't, it doesn't seem to mean a big deal to them. So you're like, okay. Are there templates that you can use to save effort on streamlined communication? Absolutely. For our team, I'll just show you, we do what we call canned emails. And we can do, I'll get this to go away. Well, anyways, I can't seem to get this to go down.
I don't know what that is.
It's the Zoom, hang on, I think I can move it, hang on. So we have what we call canned emails, and so we have templates out here in Google. You can create templates, and so I can create, like I have an 83 checklist, so I've sent it to other people. We have a review email, we have our when a seller closes, so here's all the things we're going to share with them coming up in right before closing. We're almost to the finish line. Here's the things you need to come to closing with. Here's where you're going to close. And then here's your next steps. So any communication, like if there's any last repairs being done, we're gonna communicate that, we're gonna attach their settlement statement. So it's just we're gonna do your walkthrough, we're gonna talk about your utilities, so those are templates that you can create out here, and then you can customize them for each transaction, but I would highly recommend doing that. It will save your life, you will be, or your time, I guess, not your life, but your time. Okay. And you know, some of your CRMs, depending on what you use, also can do some contract to close templates and keep track of your transaction, which is really great. Brevity is awesome. I mean, there's several that are really great to use, so.
Yeah, our team uses Command for every
Yeah.
single thing.
What team are you on?
The Fisher team with
Okay,
Brian.
yeah, Brian. Let me see what's going on. Okay. All right, so we've already talked about the timelines. I think I went backwards. We talked about who's involved in the transaction. Oh, so we're gonna talk about a seller transaction. Who's involved in the seller transaction? And of course, you know, you're going to, so that was all buy side stuff, I guess. Sorry, I was talking about both. But when you take a listing, you are definitely wanting to make sure you stay in front of them and help them know what's going on with their property. People want feedback on showings, like there's a lot of information to be, but you want to just make sure you have a checklist for that as well. Have a checklist for setting up showings. How are you going to do that? What do they want to do? Because every client's different. Some people want to be in charge of their showings. Other people want you to take care of that. You know, our GSBR has broker bay, so there's so many options there. But once you go under contract, you know, just making sure you ask those same questions. What does my seller need? What do they need to know and do? What do I need to know and do? And what does the rest of the team need to know, do, take action on, and when? And then how do I keep it bulletproof? And so those timelines are really still the same. They're going to set the inspection, the buyer agent is, so they're going to tell you when that is. You're going to double check on earnest money as the listing agent. Again, if you are the seller's agent and they do have a better offer that came in and is a backup offer, and that buyer didn't put their earnest money down in time, you can cancel that contract. So just make sure you know all the loops and make sure you've double checked everything. You know, don't act too rash, but just make sure you're within your rights of the contract, and then you could get them more money. Your job as a listing agent is to you know, look out for the benefit of your client, get them the most money, help them get the best terms. Like, you know, if you have multiple offers, dollars aren't the only thing to look at. There's terms to look at too, and making sure that you get them the best terms for that. Then you're going to get that inspection notice. You're going to negotiate that and send a response. Of course, the appraisal is going to be due. You know, I would say I haven't seen any appraisals come back low this year that I'm aware of, but I know over the 2 years prior, like you know, prices were crazy and they were all over the place. I saw probably a good 5 or 6 those years where we'd have to negotiate again. We had one where it's actually a friend of mine's house that we listed. The buyer came in, waived all appraisal rights or any appraisal gap. And it came in low, which was really unusual because it had a big shop, it had acreage, great house, all these things. And so anyways, I mean, they had no leg to stand on, like it was about 40 grand. So anyways, long story short, buyer, they waived all of that. So they could have, you know, asked for another appraisal, which is probably what I would have done if I were them, but they didn't. They went ahead and closed. So, and then of course, you're going to make sure and tell your seller when inspections are, so they could be out of the house, and when final walkthrough are, so you can make sure that they know those dates. And they're going to want you to communicate in between all of this to let them know what's going on. So, all right. And again, we're going to have the same communication points of any deadlines, any changes to the contract for any and all parties. When their inspection notice comes in, you're going to want to help them get quotes on what it's going to cost to fix. So we try really hard to be really proactive on that and get quotes right away so that they can make a decision to have the best response back to that buyer. So getting them a list of contractors, whether you give them the list and you do it or you help schedule them for them, movers, cleaners. And then you're gonna, of course, send the contract to the title company. And then you're going to also communicate with the inspection or inspector. If you have questions, again, inspectors are not perfect. So sometimes you're gonna, as the listing agent, gonna have questions to that inspector. I will tell you, there's been a couple over the years that I've dealt with that have had a lot of repairs. I've seen inspection notices like 40, 45 items, and that's a lot. And that's a lot to get repaired, make sure everything's done, and all the vendors are set up. And then when you do the final walkthrough with the buyer and do a reinspection, like I always have that contractor, the main contractor that did most of the repairs, at least there. Because when the inspector comes back to do the reinspect again, it's their interpretation of what they felt should have been done. And if with this one, I can think of a good handful, but there was one where there was just a ton of repairs. And so we had our contractor there that did the majority of the repairs to talk about that with the inspector so we could have it taken care of right then. So we didn't hold closing up. And so again, if they were on the same page and everything was good, that's great. But if the inspector wanted it done this way and the contractor had done it this way, he could explain why he did it this way. They could come to terms and do we need to get the repair done? And he had it done so that we could still close. So definitely being proactive when you have a major list. It's not a bad thing to have whoever did the repairs there to meet with that inspector. And then sending amendments, inspection reports, and other stuff to the title company. And again, I would not send the inspection report to the lender. All right. So you guys all know Command pretty well? Okay. Well, and you can use it too, as well, to kind of keep track of your transaction, which is really great that it can track all of that.
You guys
can build
obviously
out-
don't use Command.
We don't use Command.
What do you
I mean, we
guys
use it for compliance sake, but we use CSU
Okay.
for our contract to close checklist and transaction management. And I mean, you can build out your checklist here too. Like it really, either way, it's just a matter of making sure you check off those boxes. All right.
Can you put your vendors in Command to keep track of their phone numbers and stuff?
Yeah, all your contacts, doesn't matter what, you can even tag them as vendor.
Okay, that's what I was trying to do yesterday. Do you have to put your own tag as vendor?
Yeah, you can create a custom
Create
tag.
it? Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And
And I would.
Yeah, you're gonna want to put them in there.
Yeah, I was
something,
trying to do that last week.
something we're working on right now on our team is putting our vendors in every opportunities tab, because whenever you put somebody under contract or you have a new buyer or whatever, you have to create an opportunity. And in there, if they've gone under contract, you can list all the people who's doing the inspection, the appraisal.
Then does it update
escrow,
them?
more, and it'll come up with like a comprehensive list. So you can just send that to all parties. So if somebody needs to make a call to somebody, they can, and it makes it
That's a
really
smart idea.
easy. And if you've added them one time, so say you use the same inspector, same closer every time, you just put it in there once, fill out all their information, and then it's just type in like the first two letters, and then, yep, it's Michelle Gannett, Meridian Title or something like that. So it's real easy.
We created a list years ago and we just keep updating it as sometimes, we add people and sometimes we take people off depending on if they don't do good for our clients. And so we just keep this updated and then we email it out to our clients. But yeah, I love doing that, creating that list in Command. That's really awesome. It's really smart.
Just makes it easy for us. We
Yeah.
run our whole thing off Command because Brian started with KW, and so he just started doing everything in Command, and then.
Yeah, Brian's a Command
so we
Ninja.
use it for now.
Yeah,
That's what I'm calling him, Command
Yeah.
Ninja.
All right, well, what questions do you guys have after we went through all of that?
I want to all loop back.
I think the ahas are just simply the number one things are to be communicating in a timely manner. And then have systems in place to help you do all that because everybody's a human, they're gonna forget something.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm the worst at that. So
Being proactive, like, just, you have to, like, we have those canned email templates for, here's when we go under contract. Here's, first weekend, we do weekly check-ins. We don't have anything to report, but here's what's coming up next. Always telling them what's coming next is really vital to making sure it's setting expectations. And everything about real estate with your clients is expectation management. If they're calling you to find something out, it's because we didn't communicate effectively. Yeah. And we realize that. So then we try to fill that gap, because if it's happening more than once, like we're not doing something in our process that's being proactive to them. I will write my email up here too. If you guys need anything that we talked about, and I'm happy to share any and all of our stuff. My handwriting isn't the best, sorry. If you can't read this, let me know.
I'm gonna send that to the girls online.
Yeah, tell me what I can do to help you, and I love helping everyone, so it's always important. If you ever want to come shadow our team and just sit there and watch, we always welcome. You can always come up and ask questions. So I know Jim and Don are amazing brokers, and definitely always recommend talking to them. But, and this is the other thing I would share is, the contract is there, right? And it has all of these things that we have to follow. And that's what we should always, you should know that contract like the back of your hand, so that you can explain it to your buyers and sellers, because you are representing them. So you definitely should know what it says and all the ins and outs. But then when it comes to the other agent and or what's going on during the transaction, again, if you are just like, no, it's this way, again, you're going back to a negotiation. You're right, it could be this way, black and white, but how do we get this fixed versus sticking your feet in the sand and saying, sorry, I'm following the contract to a T. There's got to be a way to fix it. If you do that, you're going to have more fall throughs than you're going to have closings. And so you just have to how can we work together to fix this? And because you can be right? Like, I guess that's where I'm coming at is I've seen agents where they'll stick their feet in the sand and I'm right. This is the way the contract reads. And I've talked to my broker and they're wrong, and that's okay. It's not about being right or wrong. It's all about how do we fix it? And when you come into that, where let's see what we can do together versus I'm right and you're wrong, or it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we're not helping our client when we're trying to stand and say we're right or wrong. Like, that doesn't do anyone any good. It just, how do we work together to get this moving forward? All right. Well, and welcome you guys to our office. We're upstairs, just over this training room, I think, on this end.
Yeah.
So,
There's the elevator.
yeah,
I always get turned around the stairwell. I don't know why.
I do
But yeah,
too.
you are
Yeah.
right above there.
we're right above here. So feel free to come by anytime. And we have our listing team, our buy side team, and then our transaction team. And yeah, I mean, we have expansion, so we're helping agents all throughout the United States. And it's really interesting to see the different markets and different things with inspections and like big deals like Oklahoma City. They don't have a lot of basement homes because of tornadoes, which is really weird. Well, not because of tornadoes, but because of their soil. But they have a ton of tornadoes, so they really should have basement. But they also, like, termites are a huge deal there, like an unbelievable.
I grew up
big
in West
deal it is.
Texas, and if you had told me that a house had termites, I would not have bought it
Isn't that
in Missouri
crazy?
because they're so bad there.
Yeah.
And also, like, I had not ever seen a basement home until actually I went to New Jersey, but that just wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Like, we have tornadoes, but we have no basements, so it's just insane.
Well, in Texas, you're too close to the ocean to.
Well, I grew up in West Texas,
Okay.
so like near Midland, Odessa.
Okay.
That's miserable.
It's miserable. Yeah, but you can see the tornado coming for like 200 miles, so it doesn't matter. There's nothing, there's no tree. Yeah.
I lived in Houston for a few years and there were no basements there either. And it was because we were
The
too
flooding.
close to the
Yeah,
ocean. Yeah, the water table.
you don't have things below grade
Yeah,
because of that.
it's interesting. And then old homes here versus, like you're gonna have older homes that are gonna have, you just have to really look through them and then make sure you get them inspected. Some old homes, if they have basements, some of them leak and it's very common in certain areas of Springfield. And then there's some that are totally great. But water, learning over the years from inspectors and even contractors, water will make its way. And if there's an option for water to come in, it's gonna, some homes are built in an area where the water levels are just higher. And so anytime it rains, it's gonna cause leaking in those basements. And so just making sure.
That's why they have sump pumps here.
Yeah.
Like, I'd never even heard of that.
Yeah, and lift pumps, like
Mhm.
my husband and I bought a basement home a few years ago and we'd never had a basement. No, we've had a basement home, but we never had any problems. And anyways, we have a lift pump. Well, that lift pump, it got clogged somehow and started flooding our basement, which thank God we found it in time. But now there's all these little quick, cheap sensors that he just has, these sensors that alarm him if there's ever, water hitting them. So you can get these quick, cheap sensors, I think at Lowe's or Home Depot or Menards, and they'll alert you if you have a basement, put it by anything with water and it'll alert you if there's any flooding. So I would highly recommend that because it happened again in January this year and luckily we found out quickly and we got it taken care of. So, I know.
Well, technology today just makes our lives so much easier and more complicated, but easier.
That's a true statement. Well, it was nice to meet you guys. And Sam, let me know if you need anything while you're doing this.
Yeah.
Happy to help.
I think I'm gonna go talk to the TC people upstairs, because I mean, I just need to not